The big room where all the alien leaders met was very loud. Today, Ambassador Vel-Tar from the Kree Empire was angry, and his 4 arms were moving fast as he hit the special table that glowed with light. The table made pretty colors when he hit it, but nobody cared about that right now. All around the room there were creatures from 12 different worlds. They looked very different from each other. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of gas or light. But today, they all had the same worried look on their faces. The reason they were worried was floating in the air above the table. It was a recording that had been passed around secretly for many months. The recording showed something that made even the bravest warriors feel scared in the recording. There was an old human man. He had gray hair and wrinkled skin like any old person would have. But this old man was doing things that should be impossible. He was lifting huge pieces of metal that would normally need big machines to move. He was doing this with just his hands, like the metal weighed nothing at all. The recording also showed bright energy weapons shooting at the old man. These weapons could destroy buildings and kill hundreds of people. But when they hit the old man, nothing happened. The energy just bounced off his skin like water bouncing off a rock. The old man did not even look hurt or worried. Commander Egg's wife was a member of a race called the Void Hunters. These were very scary aliens, who were known for being the best fighters in the galaxy. He played another recording for everyone to see. This one was even more frightening than the first. The second recording showed the old human man standing in a place that used to be a military base. 300 of the best Kree soldiers were lying on the ground around him. They were not dead, but they were not awake either. Their weapons were broken and scattered everywhere. The strangest part was that the old man had not used any weapons himself. He was still wearing his old leather jacket, and he looked calm and peaceful, but somehow he had defeated 300 trained warriors without even getting dirty. At the end of the recording, the old man looked straight at the camera. His eyes were very strange. They looked like they had seen things that happened long, long ago. He spoke in perfect Galactic standard, which was the language all the different alien races used to talk to each other. "Tell your leaders that Earth children are under my protection," he said in a quiet voice that somehow sounded very dangerous. "Any who harm them will answer to me." All the alien leaders in the room looked at each other with fear. They had never seen anything like this before. Humans had only been part of galactic society for about 200 years. Most aliens thought humans were weak and not very important. They were surprised by how fast humans could learn new things, but nobody thought they were dangerous. But this old human was different. The Thrak hegemony had their best scientists study all the recordings. The scientists used their most advanced machines to measure the energy coming from the old man. What they found was impossible. No known technology could give these powers to a living being. High Counselor Zephyran was the leader of all the alien races. She was a snake-like creature who could float in the air around her special throne. Her voice was cold and scary when she spoke. "The matter is settled," she said. "This human called Hyun-Woo must be caught. His powers are too dangerous. They could destroy the way things work in our galaxy." All the alien leaders voted. They all agreed that the old human had to be captured. The council decided to send their best team to catch him. This team was led by Captain Dae-Sung, who was actually a human himself. Dae-Sung was very different from other humans. He had decided long ago that humans should obey the alien council, even if it meant going against other humans. He had proven himself by fighting against human rebels many times. The alien leaders trusted him because he always chose the council over his own people. The council leaders did not know something very important. The old man they called Hyun-Woo could hear everything they were saying even though he was very far away. He could do this using powers they did not understand. On a quiet farming planet far from the council meeting, Hyun-Woo was working in his garden. He grew vegetables from Earth that somehow could grow in alien soil. When he heard what the council decided, he closed his eyes and let out a long, sad breath. The young humans who had joined the Galactic community had forgotten the old stories. These were stories about the first, humans who went to space and what happened to them. They had forgotten the warnings that were passed down from parents to children about the people who came before. Hyun-woo was not just any human. He was one of the awakened. These were the first, humans to leave Earth, and they had been changed by their journey through space in ways that made them more than normal people, but not quite gods. For 300 years, Hyun-woo had watched over humans as they spread to different worlds. He always stayed hidden and always protected his people, but never let them know he was there. But now, the council had forced him to stop hiding. He walked to an old box in his house and took out a communication device. This device was older than the council itself, and used technology that was more advanced than anything the aliens had. With careful movements, he turned it on and sent a signal. This signal had not been used for more than 200 years, across the galaxy, in hidden places that nobody knew about. 11 other devices, just like his, began to glow with ancient light. The 12 were waking up, and the galaxy was about to remember something that the older alien races had tried very hard to forget. They were about to remember why the first humans to go into space had been treated with fear and respect by aliens who were much older and wiser. The alien races that had been around for thousands of years knew something that they never told the younger races. They knew what really happened when humans first learned to travel faster than light. They knew about the 12 volunteers who had gone into the empty space between stars and what they had become when they returned. But these older aliens had made a deal among themselves to never speak about what they had seen. They thought it was safer for everyone if the truth stayed hidden. They were wrong as Hyun-woo activated his signal device. He looked up at the stars in the sky. He felt sad because he knew that peaceful times were about to end. The council had made a choice, and now everyone would have to live with what happened because of that choice. Soon the galaxy would learn that some humans were much more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and the question was not whether these humans could be defeated. The question was whether galactic civilization would survive when they decided to stop hiding. Captain Dae-sung stood on the bridge of his warship called Retribution and looked at the big screen that showed him where his target was. He had brought the best fighters from across the galaxy with him. Each one had been chosen because they were experts at catching dangerous enemies. His team had Cortan shock troopers who came from a world where everything was very heavy. These soldiers were incredibly strong and could survive in places that would crush normal people. He also had ethereal assassins who could walk through walls like ghosts, and hive mind tacticians whose brains worked together to predict what enemies would do before they did it. Lieutenant Nara was looking at her computer screens. Her body had machine parts that glowed with blue light as she gathered information about their target. Target confirmed on planet Kepler 442b, she said. The planet has about 2,000 humans living there, mostly farmers and their families. The target Hyun-woo runs a simple vegetable farm on the northern part of the planet. Dae-sung felt strange about leading a mission to capture another human, but he had made his choice long ago. He believed that humans needed to follow all the rules that the Alien Council made. If humans like Hyun-woo broke these rules, it would cause problems for all humans everywhere. Remember, we need him alive, he told his soldiers. Council scientists want to study him. They want to understand how he got these powers. Whatever technology he is using, we need to learn about it. The strike team left their ship when the planet's 2 moons were hiding them from view. Their technology made them invisible to normal sensors. They flew down to Hyun-woo's farm as the sun was setting. The shadows were long across, fields of plants that had originally come from Earth, but somehow grew well in alien soil. The old man was exactly where their spies said he would be. He was taking care of his garden with the same careful attention he showed in all the spy videos. When Dae-sung got close enough to see him clearly, he was surprised. The old man looked like he was about 70 years old, with silver hair tied back and clothes that looked like they were made by hand. He seemed completely normal and harmless. Nothing like the powerful being the council was afraid of. Target acquired, Dae Sung whispered into his communication device. Beginning approach, but as the team moved closer, something felt wrong. All the local animals had gone completely quiet. This was not normal when stealth technology was being used. The air seemed to get thicker, and Dae Sung noticed that his team's advanced sensors were starting to show strange readings that made no sense. Hyun Woo slowly stood up from his work and turned toward where they were hiding. His eyes were ancient and very sad, but somehow he could see Dae Sung even though the captain was using camouflage technology that should have made him invisible. "You have come very far to visit an old farmer, Hyun Woo," said in Galactic Standard. His voice was quiet, but somehow everyone could hear him clearly, even though he was far away. "I can sense your confusion, young captain. You wonder how someone from your own species could have abilities that frighten the mighty council. All their advantages disappeared instantly. The Corton shock troopers raised their plasma weapons while the ethereal assassins began appearing and disappearing as they surrounded the target. But Hyun Woo stayed calm with his old hands, empty of any weapons. The council believes I am an anomaly." He continued, taking a step forward that somehow covered 10 meters of ground in an instant. "They think I found some technology, some enhancement that gives impossible power to a mortal being. They are both right and very, very wrong." The attack began without any orders. Professional training and survival instincts kicked in as the strike team realized they were facing something beyond their understanding. Plasma bolts, sonic disruptors, and energy blades that could cut through anything all hit the old man's position with enough force to destroy several city blocks. When the weapons stopped firing and all the energy cleared away, Hyun Woo was standing exactly where he had been before. He was completely unharmed. The ground around him showed no damage, and the plants in his garden were not even disturbed by the devastating attack. He looked disappointed rather than angry. "I had hoped you would choose wisdom over violence," he said, sadly, "but I understand your fear." What happened next would be talked about in secret council reports for many years. Survivors' accounts were all different, and many claimed they could not remember clearly what had occurred. But Captain Dae Sung remembered every impossible moment with perfect clarity, and these memories would haunt him for the rest of his life. Hyun Woo raised one weathered hand with his palm open toward the sky. The air around him began to shimmer, but not with heat. It was something. Much more fundamental. Reality itself seemed to bend, creating ripples that spread outward from the old man like stones dropped in still water. When those ripples reached the strike team, their advanced weapons simply stopped working. They were not broken or destroyed, but somehow the weapons forgot that they had ever been designed to hurt anyone. "You seek to understand what I am," Hyun Woo said. And now his voice carried sounds that were beyond normal hearing. "Very well, but knowledge comes with responsibility, and responsibility often brings sorrow." The old man's appearance began to change, not dramatically, but in small ways that suggested vast power being held carefully under control. His eyes became brighter, with an intensity that hurt to look at directly. The air around him sparked with energies that made the team's sensors scream warnings in languages they did not recognize. Most disturbing was the sense of incredible age that came from him, not just the decades of his apparent lifetime, but something measured in the formation of planets and stars. Lieutenant Nara's cybernetic systems, which were designed to process and analyze any possible threat, simply shut down to protect themselves. The ethereal assassins found they could no longer phase shift, their quantum abilities somehow negated by the old man's presence. The Corton shock troopers, who were bred for warfare on worlds with crushing gravity and poisonous air, fell to their knees, as if the weight of entire solar Systems was pressing down on them. We are the awakened. Hyun Woo explained, and his voice now seemed to come from everywhere at once. The first humans to touch the void between worlds and return changed. We were your species first, gift to the galaxy, and perhaps our greatest mistake. He gestured, and the air above the farm shimmered like water. Images began to form, memories pulled from depths of space and time that were older than the current galactic civilization. The strike team saw Earth as it had been centuries ago, blue and green and beautiful. They also saw the moment when 12 people had volunteered for humanity's first attempt at faster-than-light travel. The experimental ship had not been designed for living passengers. It was only for testing whether conscious minds could survive the journey through hyperspace. What the scientists had not expected was that hyperspace would journey through them in return, fundamentally changing not just their bodies, but their connection to the fabric of reality itself. We returned to find that only days had passed on Earth, but we had experienced centuries in the void. Hyun Woo continued. We had seen the birth of galaxies and the death of stars. We had touched the quantum foundations of existence and been forever changed by that contact. Captain Dae-sung watched in horrified fascination as the images showed the 12 returning astronauts demonstrating abilities that seemed like magic to their Earthbound colleagues. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level, travel vast distances through folded space, and see events across time in ways that allowed them to guide humanity's early expansion into space while remaining hidden from galactic attention. We made a choice, Hyun Woo said, as his form slowly returned to that of a simple elderly farmer. We would watch over our people but never rule them. We would protect but never control. We would guide but never reveal ourselves unless absolutely necessary. The strike. Teams, weapons began working again, but none of them moved to use them. They had seen enough to understand that such tools were meaningless against beings who existed partially outside normal space and time. More importantly, they had seen the genuine care in the old man's memories, the centuries of quiet service and protection he had provided to human colonies across the galaxy. The Council fears what they do not understand, Hyun Woo concluded. But their fear has now forced me to break a promise I have kept for 3 centuries. The signal has been sent. My brothers and sisters are awakening from their chosen isolation. High above the planet, communication systems throughout the local sector began detecting strange transmissions on frequencies that should not have been able to carry information. These signals were composed of mathematical sequences that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions and were being received by hidden installations on worlds the Council had never catalogued. Across the galaxy, 11 other farms, workshops, schools, and quiet retreats felt the call. The awakened were stirring, and the consequences of the Council's decision were about to reshape galactic civilization in ways no one could predict. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council happened very quickly after they received Captain Dae-sung's first report. The big chamber where all the alien leaders normally argued about politics was now filled with barely controlled panic. The holographic displays showed sensor readings that their best scientists said were impossible. Energy signatures that broke several basic laws of physics. Ambassador Vel-Tar was walking back and forth across the chamber floor with nervous energy. His 4 arms were moving wildly as he spoke. The strike team has been neutralized without any deaths, but they report that the target showed abilities beyond anything in our databases. Captain Dae-sung claims the human manipulated local space and time as easily as breathing. High Counselor Zeph wrapped herself tighter around her floating throne. Her snake-like eyes were fixed on the tactical displays. One strange human we could contain or eliminate. But these transmissions suggest there are others, possibly many others, with similar abilities. The Thrak hegemony's chief scientist, Kelnara, floated near the central display. Her gaseous form was shimmering with worry. The mathematical structures embedded in these signals are unprecedented. They appear to be instructions for manipulating quantum fields in ways our most advanced civilizations have never achieved. If humans possess this knowledge, she did not finish her sentence, but every representative understood what she meant. The delicate balance of galactic power, carefully maintained through thousands of years of treaties and technological limitations, could be destroyed overnight. Commander Zeif leaned forward in his chair. His mechanical implants were whirring as he calculated. Tactical scenarios. We must assume the worst-case situation. If these awakened humans decide to openly oppose Council authority, our military advantages become meaningless. Conventional weapons, even our most advanced designs, would be useless against beings who can manipulate matter at the quantum level. The chamber became silent as everyone realized how serious their situation was. For the first time in galactic history, they faced a threat they could not understand, could not predict, and most, terrifyingly, could not control through superior technology or numbers. But it was the human representative who broke the silence, and his words made every being present feel cold. Ambassador Tae-hyun had served the Council loyally for decades, had often supported decisions that worked against immediate human interests for the greater good of interstellar relations. "Honored counselors," he said quietly. His voice carried a strange mixture of pride and dread. "I believe you have fundamentally misunderstood what you are dealing with. The being you call Hyun-woo is not an anomaly or an enhanced individual. He is a guardian, one of the awakened, who have protected humanity throughout our expansion into space." The revelation hit the chamber, like a physical blow. Several representatives began speaking at once, their words overlapping in a noise of fear and accusation. "You knew about this," Veltar roared, advancing on the human ambassador. Tae-hyun raised his hands peacefully, but did not back down. "I knew the stories. The legends passed down through human families who had encountered strange protectors in times of crisis. But I believed they were myths, folklore created to explain unexplained rescues and miraculous survivals." He activated his personal display, showing historical records that had been dismissed as exaggerated accounts by human colonists. Stories of mysterious figures who appeared during pirate attacks, natural disasters, and first contact situations gone wrong always. The same pattern, a single human, seemingly ordinary, who resolved impossible situations through means that witnesses struggled to describe. "They have been watching over us for centuries," Tae-hyun continued, "guiding our expansion, protecting our colonies, ensuring our survival in a galaxy that was often hostile to newcomers. And we never realized it, because they chose to remain hidden high." Counselor Zephran's voice carried a note of desperate authority. "Then contact them. Use your influence as humanity's representative to negotiate a peaceful resolution." But Tae-hyun shook his head sadly. "The time for negotiation has passed. By sending a strike team to capture one of the awakened, you have declared them enemies of the Council. They will respond accordingly as..." If to prove his point, the chamber's communication systems suddenly turned on without anyone activating them. The main display flickered and changed, showing not the familiar interface of Council technology, but something older, more elegant, and completely alien despite being of human origin. 11 figures appeared on the screen, each clearly human, but carrying an unmistakable aura of otherworldly power. They stood in different locations across the galaxy, some on worlds the Council recognized, and others in places that seemed to exist in folded space. At their center, speaking for them all, was the old farmer the strike team had failed to capture, honored members of the Galactic Council. Hyun-woo said, his voice carried clearly despite the impossible distance. "You have chosen to view humanities Guardians as a threat to be eliminated. This decision saddens us greatly, as we have worked for centuries to ensure peace between our people and the greater galactic community. The chamber erupted in chaos, as representatives demanded to know how the transmission was possible, how their most secure systems had been so easily bypassed. But Hyun-woo continued speaking, his calm voice, somehow audible above all the noise. We offer you one final opportunity for wisdom. Withdraw your forces, end your plans for our capture or elimination, and we will return to our chosen isolation. Continue on your current path, and you will discover why the elder races of this galaxy choose to speak of humanity only in whispers. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. On the displays, tactical sensors showed energy buildups at locations throughout the galaxy, power sources that registered as small stars condensed into humanoid forms. But what happened next was even more frightening than the demonstration of power. Communication networks across the galaxy began reporting strange phenomena. Ships that had been preparing to join the hunt for the awakened suddenly found their weapons. Systems offline, not damaged, but simply refusing to function. Military bases reported that their personnel could not remember their orders or why they had been mobilized. On 12 worlds scattered across galactic space, other members of the awakened began to reveal themselves. Each one had been living quiet lives as teachers, farmers, craftsmen, or scholars. Each one had been protecting their local human communities for centuries without anyone realizing what they were. Jin-woo emerged from his position as a university professor on New Seoul. His students had always wondered why he seemed to know things that were not in any textbook. Now they watched in amazement as he demonstrated abilities that made their most advanced technology look like primitive tools. Sung-min stopped pretending to be a simple mechanic on the trade station. Harmony, his workshop, had always been the place where impossible repairs were accomplished, where ships, too damaged to fly, somehow became spaceworthy again. Now everyone understood why Hai-jin revealed herself on the agricultural world of New Busan, where she had spent decades ensuring that crops never failed and natural disasters never caused lasting harm. The colonists had always considered themselves lucky. Now they realized their luck had a guardian. Each revelation sent shockwaves through local governments and then up through the complex hierarchy of galactic politics species that had eagerly supported the Council's decision to capture the anomalous human suddenly found urgent reasons to withdraw their military support. The Zephyrian Trade Confederation announced that their ships would no longer be available for Council operations. The hegemony of constructed minds declared that their artificial intelligences had calculated the probability of success against the awakened as effectively zero. The Stellar Republic simply recalled all their forces and refused to explain why, but the most disturbing reports came from the elder races, the ancient civilizations that had withdrawn from galactic politics long ago. These beings, who had not spoken to younger species for centuries, suddenly began broadcasting warnings in languages that had been silent for millennia. The Void Shepherds, beings of pure energy who existed in the spaces between dimensions, sent messages that translated roughly as, "Do not wake the gardeners." The Star Weavers, who lived in pocket dimensions, emerged briefly to broadcast a single word in 17 languages: fools. Most mysterious of all were the communications from the Celestial Dominion, a crystalline race so old that they predated the formation of the current galaxy. Their message was longer and more detailed, but what it revealed made every politician in known space reconsider their career choices. The archives remember the 12 who touched the void between stars. It read, "We sealed those records in hope that the knowledge would never be needed. Again, the young races force us to speak of things that should remain forgotten. The awakened are not weapons. They are gardeners, but gardeners must sometimes prune what grows wrong." The Galactic Council had declared war on beings who had transcended the normal limitations of mortality, but as reports poured in from across the galaxy, it became clear that this war had already been lost before it began. The question now was whether galactic civilization would survive the consequences of their decision in hidden places across the galaxy. The remaining members of the 12 prepared for what they hoped would not be necessary, but they had made their choice long ago. Their people would be protected no matter the cost to. In the deepest archives of the Celestial Dominion, hidden beneath layers of bureaucratic records and forgotten treaties, Archkeeper Nal Thara discovered files that had not been accessed for 800 years. The ancient being's crystalline form pulsed with worried energy as she read reports that previous generations of her species had classified beyond top secret. The files spoke of humanity's first ventures into deep space when their primitive ships had somehow achieved faster than light, travel through methods that violated every known principle of physics. More disturbing were the accounts of first contact between human explorers and the elder races meetings that had been deliberately erased from official galactic history, null. Thera's communication reached the High Dominarch within minutes, transmitted through quantum channels that existed outside normal space and time. The message was simple, but carried implications that shook the foundation of galactic politics. The 12 have awakened. The Council has made a catastrophic error. Similar revelations were occurring across the galaxy as other elder races access their most protected archives. The Void. Shepherds beings of pure energy who existed in the spaces between dimensions began broadcasting warnings in languages that had been silent for thousands of years. The Star Weavers, who had withdrawn from galactic affairs before the current council formed, emerged from their pocket dimensions with expressions of deep concern. Each elder race possessed fragments of the same terrible knowledge. Humanity's first explorers had not simply developed faster than light travel, they had made contact with something in the void between dimensions that had fundamentally changed their nature. The resulting beings, the awakened, possessed capabilities that made them effectively living gods by the standards of normal organic life. But most troubling were the records of why the elder races had chosen to hide this knowledge. From younger civilizations, the awakened had demonstrated their power only once in recorded history during what galactic databases listed as the dissolution event, a period when an entire star system had simply vanished from normal space and time, leaving behind only gravitational echoes and radiation signatures that suggested the controlled collapse of reality itself. The system had been home to the Crex Imperium, a species whose expansion into space had been marked by the systematic extermination of other intelligent life. When the Crex had encountered early human colonies and began their standard protocols of planetary sterilization, they had unknowingly triggered a response from Guardians they could not comprehend. What happened next had been witnessed by scout ships from a dozen species, all of whom had immediately classified the records and agreed never to speak of the event. The Crex home system had not been destroyed in any conventional sense. It had been carefully, methodically removed from existence, folded out of normal space and time, and placed somewhere that physics textbooks claimed could not exist. The Crex Imperium's billion-strong population had not died. Death implied an end to existence, and what the awakened had done was far more complete. They had been edited out of reality so thoroughly that only the elder race's most protected archives retained any memory of their existence. The Crex had been a proud warrior race with technology that could crack planets and fleets that numbered in the millions. Their empire had conquered 17 star systems and enslaved 43 different species. They considered themselves the ultimate predators of the galaxy, masters of warfare and destruction, but when they encountered the first human colonies, they made a fatal mistake. They saw the humans as weak prey animals suitable only for extermination or slavery. The Crex fleet moved into the Kepler system, where 30,000 human colonists had built their New homes. The alien warships began the process they had perfected on dozens of worlds, orbital bombardment followed by ground forces to capture any survivors for experimentation. What the Kreks did not know was that one of the awakened had been living quietly among the colonists. Min Ho had spent 50 years as the settlement's doctor, treating injuries, healing the sick, and helping children be born. He had delivered babies, watched families grow, and shared in the simple joys of a peaceful community when the first Kreks bombardment began. Min Ho felt something he had not experienced in centuries, pure unlimited rage. The awakened had sworn to protect their people, but they had also sworn to remain hidden, to never reveal their true nature unless absolutely necessary. The Kreks had made that revelation necessary. The scout ships from various elder races that had been monitoring the situation from a safe distance recorded what happened next, but their sensors could barely comprehend the data. Min Ho rose from the planet's surface, not with any ship or technology, but simply by willing himself into space. His human form began to change, becoming something that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that had no names. The Kreks fleet opened fire with weapons that could glass continents, but their attacks passed through Min Ho as if he were not entirely there. When he reached their flagship, he did not destroy it. Instead, he touched the hull and began to sing in a language that predated the formation of stars. Reality began to fold around the Kreks fleet space, and time twisted into configurations that should have been impossible. The warships found themselves moving backwards through their own timelines, but in a way that created paradoxes that normal physics could not resolve. One by one, the ships began to fade, not exploding, but simply ceasing to have ever existed. The process spread from the fleet to their supply bases, then to their colonies, and finally to their home system. The awakened was not just destroying the Kreks. He was carefully editing them out of the timeline, removing every trace of their existence while preserving the lives of all their victims. The enslaved species they had conquered suddenly found themselves free with no memory of ever having been enslaved. When it was over, the Kreks Imperium had never existed. The 17 star systems they had conquered showed no signs of ever having been invaded. The 43 species they had enslaved had no record of ever meeting them. Only the elder race's archives preserved any evidence that the Kreks had ever been real. The elder races had watched this demonstration of power with a mixture of awe and terror. They realized that humanity had produced beings who could rewrite reality itself, who could edit the universe like a document and remove anything they found unacceptable. This was power that made their own most advanced technologies look like stone tools. After long debate, the elder races had made a collective decision. They would hide all records of the dissolution event and never speak of the awakened to younger civilizations. They believed that this knowledge was too dangerous for immature species who might try to provoke or control such beings. For 800 years, this agreement had held. The elder races had watched as humanity expanded into space, always protected by their hidden guardians, but never knowing the true extent of their protection. The younger races had developed their own civilizations, their own technologies, their own forms of government, all while remaining ignorant of the forces that shaped their universe. But now the Galactic Council had forced the elder races to break their silence. The threat to galactic civilization was too great to ignore. If the awakened decided that the current political structure was unacceptable, they had the power to edit it out of existence, just as they had done to the Kreks Archkeeper. Nal Thara made the decision for her entire species when she opened a communication channel to every major government in the galaxy simultaneously. Her message was broadcast in 17 languages, each translated perfectly, despite containing concepts that most species had never encountered, to all civilizations currently allied with or subject to the Galactic Council. She began Her crystalline voice carried harmonics that conveyed absolute truth. You are preparing to engage in warfare against beings who exist, partially outside the normal constraints of space and time. This is not a conflict that can be won through conventional means, nor is it one that should be attempted. The message continued with carefully chosen excerpts from the archived records, enough to convey the reality of what the awakened were capable of without revealing the full scope of the dissolution event. But even these limited revelations were sufficient to cause panic in the corridors of power across the galaxy, the Altarian. Federation immediately withdrew their battle fleets, claiming urgent need for home defense. The synthetic collective declared that their probability matrices showed zero chance of victory against opponents who could manipulate causality itself. The traitor guilds announced suspension of all military contracts pending reevaluation of risk factors. But perhaps most telling was the response from humanity's own colonial governments. Many human leaders had supported the Council's decision to investigate the anomalous individual, but now they faced the reality that their species harbored beings of godlike power. The governor of New Geneva declared a state of emergency and pleaded for protection from the very guardians who had been protecting them as. The elder races watched from their retreats and pocket dimensions. They hoped that revelation of the truth would prevent another dissolution event. But they also quietly prepared records that would preserve the memory of galactic civilization, just in case their hopes proved unfounded. The universe was about to discover whether wisdom could prevail over fear or whether the awakened would once again be forced to. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the recorded history of interstellar politics. Representatives who had spent decades building careers on careful diplomacy and calculated risks now faced a situation that made all their experience meaningless. The great chamber that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations now echoed with something never heard before: the sound of absolute panic among the galaxy's most powerful beings. High Counselor Zeph Ran no longer maintained her usual position of elegant authority. Instead, she coiled tightly around her throne, her serpentine body betraying the fear that her voice tried to hide. The reports coming in from across the galaxy painted a picture that challenged everything they thought they knew about reality itself. Military installations that had been preparing for war suddenly found their personnel unable to remember why they had been mobilized. Weapons systems that had never failed in centuries of operation simply refused to function, not broken, but somehow convinced that their purpose had never been to cause harm. Supply chains that fed the greatest military machine in galactic history ground to a halt as transport captains claimed they could no longer recall their destinations. But most disturbing were the reports from worlds where the awakened had revealed themselves. Each revelation sent shockwaves through the carefully maintained balance of galactic power Jin Wu had demonstrated his abilities to his students on New Sol by literally rewriting the atomic structure of materials with his bare hands, creating elements that should not have been able to exist in stable form. Sung Min had shown the truth of his nature by repairing a damaged starship not through conventional means, but by convincing the ship that it had never been broken. The vessel emerged from his workshop not just functional, but somehow improved in ways that engineers could not explain or duplicate. Jin had revealed herself when a massive storm threatened to destroy the crops that fed millions of people. She had walked into the heart of the weather system and simply asked it to be gentler. The storm had responded like a trained animal, becoming a gentle rain that nourished rather than destroyed. Each demonstration was impossible by the laws of physics as they were understood. Each one suggested that the awakened operated according to principles that made conventional technology obsolete. And there were 12 of them scattered across the galaxy, each one capable of rewriting reality according to their will. Ambassador Veltar paced the chamber floor, his forearms gesturing frantically as he tried to make sense of intelligence reports that contradicted everything he had learned in a lifetime of military service. Our best analysts estimate that each of these beings possesses the equivalent firepower of an entire battle fleet, he said, but that comparison is meaningless because they don't use firepower. They simply make things be different than they were before. Commander. Exif leaned forward, his mechanical implants working overtime to process tactical scenarios that led nowhere. How do you fight an enemy who can edit your weapons out of existence? How do you plan a strategy against beings who can rewrite the rules that strategy is based on? We might as well be trying to wage war against the laws of physics themselves. The Thrak hegemony's chief scientist, Kel Nara, had been analyzing the energy signatures detected during the various revelations. Her gaseous form flickered with patterns that indicated extreme distress. The mathematical structures underlying their abilities are not just advanced, they are fundamentally different from anything we have encountered. They appear to manipulate reality at the quantum level, not through technology, but through direct conscious interaction with the basic forces that hold the universe together. High Counselor Zeph Ran tried to maintain some semblance of authority, but her voice carried undertones of desperation that everyone could hear. We must find a way to negotiate. We must convince them that the Council poses no threat to their people, that our investigation was based on misunderstanding. But Ambassador Tai Hyun shook his head sadly. The time for negotiation ended when you sent armed forces to capture one of them. The Awakened have spent centuries avoiding exactly this kind of confrontation. They remained hidden specifically to prevent the galaxy from having to face the choice between submitting to their power or being removed as a threat, as if responding to his words, the Chamber's communication systems activated without authorization. The main display showed not the familiar Council interface, but something that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal space. A loud 11 figures appeared on the screen, each clearly human, but surrounded by energies that made the Chamber's sensors emit. Warning sounds in frequencies that hurt to hear. We offered you wisdom. High Counselor Zeph Ran said the central figure who the Council now knew was Hyun, Wu the farmer they had tried to capture. You chose fear. Instead, we offered you peace. You chose war. Now you will experience the consequences of those choices. The transmission showed images from across the Galaxy Council military bases where soldiers stood motionless, staring at weapons they could no longer remember how to use. Battleships drifting in space as their crews tried to recall why they had left port. Entire fleets that had been mobilized for war, now floating helplessly as their personnel struggled with memories that no longer made sense. But the most terrifying demonstration was yet to come. Hyun Woo gestured, and the space around the Council chamber began to change. Reality twisted in ways that should have torn the station apart, but instead created something impossible. A pocket of space where different physical laws, applied gravity, became negotiable, flowing in directions that had no names. Time moved at different rates in different parts of the chamber, allowing some representatives to experience hours while others lived through minutes. The very air began to show properties of both matter and energy existing as both gas and light simultaneously. This is a fraction of what we are capable of, Hyun Woo said as the impossible effects slowly returned to normal. We show you this, not to threaten, but to illustrate the futility of opposing us. You cannot fight beings who exist partially outside the framework that defines reality. The demonstration ended, but its impact on the Council representatives was profound. Several alien dignitaries had to be treated for shock as their minds struggled to process what they had witnessed. The ethereal delegate from the Whisper Nebula simply faded from existence, choosing to retreat to their home dimension rather than continue participating in a situation they could not comprehend. We do not wish to rule your civilizations, Hyun Woo continued. We have no desire to reshape galactic society according to our will. All we have ever wanted is to protect our people from those who would harm them, but you have forced us to reveal ourselves. And now the galaxy must live with the knowledge of what we are. High Counselor Zeph Ran found her voice, though it trembled with barely controlled fear. What do you want from us? How can this situation be resolved? The answer was simple, but carried implications that would reshape galactic politics forever. You will cease all attempts to capture, contain, or control any of the awakened. You will remove all restrictions on human expansion and colonization. You will ensure that no harm comes to human communities under any circumstances. And you will do all of this while pretending that we do not exist. But what if other species object to these terms? What if they refuse to accept human immunity from council authority? Then, those species will discover what happened to the Krex Imperium. Hyun Woo replied, and even through the transmission, his ancient eyes seemed to look directly at each representative. The elder races, remember, we hope you will choose to learn from their wisdom rather than repeat the Krex mistake. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. The most powerful political body in galactic history had just received an ultimatum from beings who possessed the power to enforce. It threw means that made conventional military force irrelevant as reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy. It became clear that the Awakened had already begun implementing their demands. Military units that had been preparing to hunt them found themselves reassigned to defensive positions. Human colonies that had been marked for investigation were suddenly granted expanded territorial rights. Trade routes that had been restricted to human traffic were opened without explanation. The galaxy was learning a new truth. Power did not always come from technology or numbers or political influence. Sometimes power came from beings who could convince reality itself to be different. And when such beings made demands, the only rational response was immediate compliance. The Galactic Council had declared war on gods and discovered that gods did not fight wars. They simply rewrote the universe until wars were unnecessary. The deadline came not with explosions or invasions, but with something far more profound: silence. Across the galaxy, every communication network, every quantum entanglement relay, every subspace transmission array simply stopped functioning. For 12 hours, trillions of beings experienced something their civilizations had never known: complete isolation from the greater community of intelligent life. When communication resumed, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The Galactic Council chambers stood empty, not destroyed, but simply abandoned. Security recordings showed the representatives walking away during the blackout, their expressions vacant, as if they had forgotten why they had ever gathered or what they had been discussing. The great weapons platforms that had been positioned throughout the core systems were found powered down their crews, reporting that they could no longer remember how to operate equipment they had used for decades. Government buildings across dozens of worlds showed the same pattern: officials arriving for work only to stand confused in offices whose purpose they could no longer recall, military commanders staring at battle plans written in their own handwriting, but unable to understand what the symbols meant, entire bureaucracies grinding to a halt as the people who ran them forgot why those institutions had ever been necessary. But the most profound changes were subtler and more far-reaching. Throughout the galaxy, every database, every historical record, every piece of documentation that mentioned plans to capture or contain the Awakened had been carefully edited. Not destroyed. Destruction would have left evidence, but altered so seamlessly that only the most careful analysis revealed that changes had been made at all. The official records now showed that the Council had voted to offer diplomatic recognition to humanity's Guardian class, acknowledging their right to exist and operate freely within galactic space. Military reports described successful joint exercises between Council forces and the mysterious human protectors. Scientific journals contained peer-reviewed papers on the beneficial aspects of having enhanced individuals monitoring interstellar trade routes. Reality had been quietly rewritten. History carefully adjusted, and the entire political structure of galactic civilization had been modified to accommodate the existence of beings who could edit the universe like a text document, politicians who had voted. For war now had memories of voting for peace. Military officers who had planned invasions remembered planning diplomatic missions. Scientists who had studied the Awakened as threats now recalled decades of beneficial research partnerships. On his farm on Kepler, 442b, Hyun-woo tended his garden as if nothing had changed. But when Captain Dae-sung arrived, no longer leading a strike team but traveling alone in a simple transport ship, the old man was not surprised. "You remember?" Hyun-woo observed. Not looking up from the earth vegetables that somehow thrived in alien soil, Dae-sung nodded his face, showing the strain of holding memories that conflicted with every official record he could access. "I remember enough. The mission that never happened. The war that was never declared. The ultimatum that was never delivered, and yet you still came. I had to understand what you are, what you did to us, to the entire galaxy." Dae-sung's voice carried confusion rather than accusation. "Did you really change history itself?" Yun-woo straightened slowly, his ancient eyes meeting those of the younger human. "History is not a fixed thing, Captain. It is a story told by those who survive to tell it. We simply encourage the galaxy to remember a better story, but the Council, their decision to capture you, still happened in the quantum shadows between what is and what might have been. But this reality, the one we all inhabit now, has chosen to remember a universe where wisdom prevailed over fear." The old man gestured to his garden where plants from a dozen worlds grew in impossible harmony. "Is this not preferable to the alternative?" Dae-sung was quiet for a long moment, struggling with concepts that his augmented human mind could barely process. "What happened to the others? Who remember? The strike team. The council members who voted for your capture. They will live with the burden of dual memory, as you do. It is a small price to pay for the preservation of galactic civilization." Hyun-woo returned. To his work, his weathered hands gentle with the growing things. In time, most will convince themselves that the uncomfortable memories were merely dreams or simulations. Only those strong enough to bear the truth will retain clear recollection of what was, and if the Council decides to threaten humanity again. For the first time, something cold flickered in the old man's eyes. The galaxy now remembers consciously, or not, what happens to civilizations that choose genocide over coexistence. The Crex Imperium serves as an object lesson, even if few understand why their name fills them with instinctive dread. Dae-sung felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's weather. "You would do it again, if forced to choose between the survival of our people and the continuation of galactic civilization as it currently exists. We would choose our people, but we would prefer never to face such a choice again." Hyun-woo looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The Awakened, our gardeners. Captain, we tend and protect and guide. But gardeners must sometimes prune what has grown wrong to preserve the health of the whole across the galaxy. The effects of the Awakened intervention became apparent in countless small ways. Human colonies that had been struggling with hostile environments suddenly found their crops growing better, their water supplies cleaner, their weather more cooperative. Trade routes that had been plagued by pirates for generations became mysteriously. Safe ships that had been lost in dangerous sectors were found drifting peacefully in safe harbors, their crews reporting pleasant dreams of helpful strangers. Diplomatic crises that had threatened to spark wars resolved themselves with unusual speed. Enemy fleets that had been preparing for battle found themselves participating in joint training exercises instead. First contact situations with newly discovered species proceeded with remarkable smoothness, as if invisible hands were guiding every interaction toward peaceful outcomes. But perhaps most importantly, the galaxy developed what historians would later call the Krex effect, a species-wide reluctance to pursue aggressive expansion or systematic extermination of other intelligent life. No government could quite explain why such policies suddenly seemed unthinkable, but even the most militaristic civilizations found themselves drawn toward cooperation rather than conquest. The elder races watched these changes with a mixture of relief and concern. They understood what had been done and why, but they also knew that the awakened had fundamentally altered the nature of reality itself. The universe now operated according to rules that prioritized the protection of humanity, above the natural order of cause and effect. In hidden archives across the galaxy, new files were created and immediately classified. These documents spoke of the day when 12 humans had demonstrated that some powers transcended politics, law, and even physics itself. They recorded the moment when galactic civilization learned that protection could be more terrifying than conquest, and that gardeners could reshape entire realities to preserve what they chose to nurture. The old human's name was never again spoken in the context of capture or containment. Official records showed only successful diplomatic contact with humanity's guardian class and beneficial cooperation in maintaining galactic peace. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, between star systems, travelers would report seeing figures tending impossible gardens on worlds that should have been barren, or walking among refugees from conflicts that ended too quickly to make historical record. The galaxy had learned to remember a better story, but the true authors of that story remained vigilant, ensuring that their chosen narrative would continue to be worth telling. The awakened had shown mercy by rewriting history rather than ending it. But their message was clear to those wise enough to understand it. There would be no second chances. Humanity was under their protection, and that protection extended to the entire fabric of reality itself. Anyone who threatened the innocent would not be fought or defeated. They would simply be edited out of existence as thoroughly as if they had never been born. The Galactic Council had ordered the old humans' capture. But in the end, it was the Council itself that had been captured by a new understanding of power and its proper use. The universe continued to turn, and civilizations continued to grow. But now they did so under the watchful eyes of beings who had learned to tend reality itself, like a garden. And in that garden, humanity bloomed protected by guardians, who asked for nothing in return except the chance to see their people thrive among the stars. The story had ended not with victory or defeat, but with the quiet satisfaction of gardeners who had successfully protected their most precious crop. The future stretched ahead full of possibilities, but those possibilities would unfold in a reality shaped by 12 humans who had touched the void between worlds and returned with the power to ensure that some stories would always have happy endings.